Hello, this is Alexander Siddig, and you're listening to Kneel Before Pod, and don't tune out.
Kneel Before Blog presents Kneel Before Pod.
Hello and welcome to another galaxy-hopping episode of Kneel Before Pod. I'm your host Craig and I'm investigating the sudden appearance of the second season of Star Trek Discovery. But first, I need to beam aboard a podcaster in distress. So, on my travels, I received a distress call from a fellow podcast and had to beam aboard the only survivor. So, I believe his name is Lee. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me, Craig. I'm a fan of the podcast, so it's a pleasure to join you here today.
Well, it was just lucky that I happened by because, you know, distress calls aren't often answered.
If we're going by a certain TV show, then usually when an alarm has been answered, I think I'm going to take command of your podcast now.
Well, it's about time someone did. Yeah, so before we begin, just tell us a bit about you. You didn't pop into the universe on this podcast, so what do you do? Where are you from?
Yeah. In my kind of personal life outside of my working life, I co-host and co-produce two podcasts. So I produce Filibuster, which is a film podcast where we kind of look at indie cinema, film festivals, interviews, kind of a bit of everything, and always something a bit different each week. And recently, 7 episodes deep into a brand new podcast called the A24 Project. So, well, you guys have got, you know, the nerd base all covered here. With something like the A24 Project, we focus on sort of independent cinema there and original films sort of like your Lady Bird, Spring Breakers, The Witch, movies that have been distributed by the company A24. So that's been really exciting. We seem to be getting good traction on that. So yeah, it's good fun to kind of podcast. So coming onto this is always a treat to come onto a show like this where I'm not having to do the editing, I'm not having to do the hosting. It's a nice change.
Yeah, it's good to sit in the peanut gallery just heckling.
Exactly.
So this A24 project, is this officially sanctioned by them, or is it just a...
Oh, no. Yeah, it's just a fan podcast. So they have their own podcast, but they get people like, say, Greta Gerwig, Jason Schwartzman to come on, talk about life and cinema, and don't really touch upon their films. And what we do is we review 2 A24 movies at a time every 2 weeks. So it's pretty exciting for us. I mean, this year we'll probably be... We're still quite a few years away from getting anywhere remotely close to their current output, but you know, we've got 3 kind of A24 movies on the horizon here in Scotland, kind of mid-90s, and 8th Grade will be at the Glasgow Film Festival, and then we've got Under the Silver Lake coming out in March. So it's kind of an exciting time for fans of kind of A24 films. Cool.
And where can listeners find you if they so wish?
Yeah, you can find us anywhere you sort of download your podcast. So that's your iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker, you know, anything that comes under that. And you can find us also on the Nerd Party Network, so thenerdparty.com. So there's a huge amount of podcasts on there. So we have something like Nerd Nuptial, where it's a husband and wife talk about their geeky loves and passions. There's Star Wars, Doctor Who, Harry Potter podcasts. There's a podcast that called Missing Frames, where it's all about watching those movies that we should have watched by now. I recently was a guest on that as well. I haven't watched Highlander, which is a shock for probably for being a Scottish man. So finally watched that this week, and I've never had so much grief from people on Twitter before for saying I've never watched a movie. So yeah, we can be found there with a whole load of other great shows.
Cool. And is there a Twitter handle that people could approach you and hurl abuse? Or
Yeah, you can hurl abuse at me at Lee_Nostromo, and you can find our podcast on Twitter as well at Join Nerd Party.
Cool, and everything will be linked in the show notes for people who like to read the show notes. If not, listen to what was said and then just go there. I can confirm as an occasional listener, it's a good podcast. So I'd recommend checking out the filibuster one anyway. I haven't listened to the 24 one, I'll confess. It's the ultimate film hipster podcast. You're not just hip enough to listen to that. It's okay, I understand. Yeah. That's the tagline. Just the tagline, the ultimate film hipster podcast. Cool. Right, so we are here to talk about some Star Trek, but before that, you can indulge in our little fun feature, Kneel Before and Rise Against. So, as the guest, I'll let you go first, in case I've stolen anything that you want to talk about. So, what would you like to kneel before? What do you like? It's been kind of exciting this week because it feels like it's been one of those weeks where people will talk about this, where, you think of the 90s, we had Ants in A Bug's Life, we had Deep Impact, Armageddon. This week we have had 2 documentaries on the Fire Music Festival land online, one on Netflix, one on Hulu in America, and they seem to have kind of exploded the internet, and I must admit I've got completely engaged in this music festival documentary binge. So for those not familiar with it, the Fire Festival kicked off a few years ago, and I'm sure everyone has seen that famous picture of a couple slices of bread with some plastic cheese on it and a bit of salad. This was meant to be like the biggest high-end music festival in the world on a Caribbean island, but reality didn't quite match the social media buzz that was going for it. And it was fantastic this week because there was not one but 2 documentaries, as I was saying, released. So it was quite fascinating to watch and compare the 2, and it was kind of like millennial Jaws in a way, that you're watching this music festival absolutely having a disaster, and it's like 2 weeks to go, 1 week to go, it's like 2 days to go, and it's like torrential rain, and then like you have all these Instagram influencers arrive on the island and see that their tents aren't these villas that they were promised, but in fact hurricane relief places. It was really good. The documentaries are both a little bit different. The Hulu one, for example, has interviews with the head organizer of this, and it's more focused on sort of the millennial culture that kind of allows things like this to happen, and the Netflix one is more focused on the build up to the event, and it was actually created by the guys who kind of covered the social media for the Fire Festival. They were recruited to do it, so then they have now turned around and ultimately threw the whole festival under the bus with their scathing documentary. It's really well worth checking out. I'm a Letterboxd fiend, and I think I saw everyone that I know or follow checked in on this documentary at the weekend, and some of the content on social media ripping the piss out of the event has been absolutely hysterical. Cool. It sounds like you get a pretty complete picture then between the 2 of them. Yeah, you do. It would be great, like, if you had heard more from sort of the influencers about their reaction to landing on this island and everything that, they had kind of built up and hyped it up to be, and then what the reality was like for them as it came crashing down would have been interesting. But I'm all for a 3rd documentary. 2, as I say, the fact that we got 2 in a week is unbelievable. It's quite surreal. Or the sort of fictional Hollywood film version that stars some hot young stars and starlets. Yeah, I can only wonder who will play Ja Rule in the film version of it. Yeah, well, it could happen, or we maybe put the idea in someone's head, so that's possibly concerning. So sounds good. Check that out if you have time. How do you get Hulu in the UK? Sometimes you've got to, if you don't have an option to access this documentary through any other way, or rent it or buy it, sometimes you've got to be a little creative, I suppose. Well, I fly to the US every week to watch DC TV shows. Oh, there you go. See, I'm surprised we didn't bump into each other on the same flight. Yeah, so my kneel before is Reign of the Superman, the recent DC animated film. I had the pleasure of seeing it in the cinema. It had its one night only release where it doubled up with the Death of Superman film. Watching them together was great. It's head and shoulders above anything Superman wise that the DC live action films have put out of late. And this is speaking as someone that likes Man of Steel. I'll defend that until the death of me, I guess, because Henry Cavill will not die before me. But yeah, I liked it. I love the DC animated output. I think that it's made by people that are kind of passionate about the characters, that know what they're doing with them, know how to tell the stories, know how to adapt them. And Reign of the Superman is a lot of fun. It's got Rainn Wilson voicing Lex Luthor, and he's really good. It's got kind of a slightly obnoxious, but not too obnoxious version of Superboy. So I'd recommend checking it out, but not before you've seen the first part.
I completely passed me by. I did see them kind of on offer on the Cineworld website. And I was like, I could maybe go along to that, but I'm just not a Superman fan at all. So I was like, nah, it's a pass for me.
There it is. A lot of people don't like him. I think he needs a better press agent, which is ironic because he writes stories about himself in his film, usually.
Yeah.
So that's mine. I enjoyed it. I would recommend checking it out if you can get a hold of it, which shouldn't be too hard. Now on to Rise Against. What are you not enjoying?
I am currently quite heartbroken at the moment. As I mentioned, I have a podcast called the A24 Project, and I have been waiting for just shy of a year now to see the movie 8th Grade. It is one of my most anticipated films. I unfortunately missed it at the Sundance London last year. I never got all sorted in time, wasn't able to go, so I missed it there. And I thought, you know what, it won't be too long before it comes to the UK. These things, they often come quite quickly. And I'm still waiting, and then it's been announced at the sort of turn of the year that it's going to be released on the same day as Avengers Endgame. So it's going to be the the counter programming on that day. But I had it had my fingers crossed this whole time. I was like, you know what? They might play it at Glasgow. They might play it at Glasgow Film Festival. And this week that they've announced, oh my God, they're going to be playing 8th Grade 2 nights. Bo Burnham, the writer-director, the American comedian, is coming all the way to Glasgow to introduce it, give a talk on it, which is like blowing my mind. I'm like, this has been worth all the wait. And then I look at the dates, and it's like Thursday the 28th and Saturday the 1st of March. And on Thursday the 28th, I agreed, you know what? I'm going to fly down to London on that Thursday evening, and I'm going to go catch up with some family down there, a day early. Yeah, why not? I'll go after work. So I've missed that one. And then on the 1st, I'm seeing Hamilton for the second time. So I have again missed the second opportunity to see 8th Grade. So I'm currently having the most middle-class crisis about missing 8th Grade.
I mean, you could flip it to be about sort of delayed release dates and, how those still happen in this modern era.
I know, it's absolutely ridiculous that we've waited this long. I mean, it's been out on Blu-ray already, it's kind of streaming, it's crazy, and like, I'm one of the people that believes kind of cinema is the key, so I'm kind of waiting to see it in the cinema, but, I'm forever being sort of cock-blocked from seeing this movie.
I'm kind of the same when it comes to cinema releases. If I can see something in the cinema, then I will make every effort to do so. Obviously, you can't see everything, but I think it is a better experience. Plus, it does encourage me to actually watch it. When I went to see Outlaw King at Filmhouse, I kind of saw it because I made the effort to go out of the house and watch it, whereas with it sitting on Netflix, able to watch whenever I feel like it, I might just never feel like it. Sometimes I feel like it's good to block out that period of time in your day to go somewhere and experience something. Plus, the big screen experience is always good.
Yeah, Outlaw King was a brilliant film to catch on the big screen, and I think particularly with an audience as well. So, yeah, it was definitely worth the wait for seeing something like that. Yeah.
So, my rise against is the fact that they're planning a Harley Quinn trilogy, apparently. I mean, can we just stop with this? It seems like every other week they keep announcing that Harley Quinn's going to be in some other film. So she just keeps turning up in various other projects, and it's hard to tell whether this is the same project that they just keep changing or whether it's different projects. But I think they just want to keep Margot Robbie busy as that character until she dies, which, will be a long way off. But and a trilogy about this character, I'm not sure she's interesting enough to carry a trilogy.
No, I just don't understand the point of making a trilogy. I think for whether you love DC or, have your issues with the DCEU or whatever, like, they've had problems when they've tried to jam too much in or plan too far ahead. It's sort of fallen on its kind of knees, and I don't think the idea of a Harley Quinn trilogy should be kind of right, we're definitely making 3. why don't you make one? You've maybe got a plan in mind for a couple and just see where it goes. It seems completely unnecessary. And Margot Robbie's too good an actress to be sort of wasting her time on 3 of these in a row.
Yeah, just chill out, make a good film, do a Wonder Woman, make something that's worth watching, and then see how it goes.
Yeah.
They'll never learn. It's like Sony, whenever they find something good, they just then look to ruin it immediately afterwards.
Sounds like me in a relationship.
Sounds like me in pretty much anything. Yeah, ice cream. I find out a good ice cream, then I ruin it by eating too much of it, which is a weird analogy. But
I approve.
Okay, so that's that. We got to talk about something that's not Star Trek for a little while, so that was something. Now on to Star Trek. So what's your connection to the franchise, and what did you think of Discovery Season 1?
Yeah, like my kind of connection, I'm 31, probably not too far off 3 decades as a fan. I remembered watching it back in the day on the BBC, then Sky, and I've just always loved Trek. I mean, I grew up with The Next Generation, loving that. I always remembered I was going to go see Generations at the cinema in, 94? No, it was 95 in the UK. But unfortunately I had a case of diarrhea, so my first Star Trek movie had to be First Contact a few years later. I was 10 at the time, and my dad took me after school all the way to Aberdeen, which was like 35 miles away, to see First Contact. So that was the first one I got to ever see in the big screen, and it was a pretty special experience. And Deep Space Nine's my favourite, and it kind of hit me at the right age. I was sort of 10 or so at the time when it really kind of kicked in with things like sort of the Klingon War and the Dominion War. It felt like TV for sort of adolescence at the time, where something like Voyager was pretty kid friendly and I thought was pretty poor. The Next Generation I enjoyed a lot, but Deep Space Nine felt like it was just, it was really cool, it was badass, and I think so highly of it. And like when Discovery was announced, I was just so excited for it. And I'm a positive Star Trek fan. I think I'm not a sycophant or anything like that. I say if there's a problem or I disagree with things, or I try not to get too wrapped up in it. But I really enjoyed season 1. I mean, it certainly had its challenges, and I mean, pretty much every Star Trek series in its first year, maybe apart from the original series for the most part, have had its difficulties in front of and behind the camera. But I really enjoyed it, and it was really, I think you can get caught up in all the tech and the advanced technology side and canon issues or whatever, but I just thought it was really fantastic TV. I thought Jason Isaacs was great. We've got such an incredible cast there in that show. I mean, I can't believe how lucky we are to have some of these people, Doug Jones, Anthony Rapp, Wilson, Cruz, all these people are fantastic. And I really enjoyed it. I had some issues here and there, but for the most part, I was happy to have Star Trek back on the TV screen weekly, something new to get in. And I really enjoyed it. And I'm curious to see where they're going to go with the second season. What about for yourself?
Well, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, just like yourself. I've been, since before I can remember, I've been watching Star Trek, and it kind of foisted on me at a young age. Listeners to this podcast will have heard me wax lyrical about all this before, and I've absolutely loved it. It's one of those things where I can just go and watch a random episode of something, at just any point where I've got some time to kill. I'll just be like, here's an episode of TNG, stick it on, let it wash over me, because it's just one of those endlessly rewatchable things. TNG is my favourite, although I do recognise that Deep Space Nine probably had a more consistent sort of through line in terms of the way they were telling stories and stuff. But there's something about the kind of exploration angle that I'll always love. And it's curious that I don't like Voyager that much as a result, because it's, it is that, but I think they dropped the ball in so many other ways. And, I love Enterprise, especially in its last 2 years. First 2 years, I mean, we can just sort of forget about them. But the last 2 years, I liked it. Discovery Season 1, really enjoyed it. I thought it was a nice update of the franchise. Turns out I'm not one of those fans that really cared about the kind of design aesthetic being slavishly recreating the original series aesthetic, which, if that bothers you, then fine. I'm not going to argue with someone that says that they can't deal with that because they think that Star Trek should look a certain way, and I can understand that mentality, but I was all for the updated visuals, because it would be really jarring to see them go back to using buttons and all that stuff when we have touchscreens and all that stuff now. So there's, it'd be a weird downgrade if you think about it. But I liked it. Jason Isaacs, as you say, was excellent. The cast are really good. Although I did have someone say that if you don't like Michael Burnham, you'll struggle because she's the main character. So if you end up taking a dislike to her for whatever reason, you might struggle to follow it. Whereas other Star Trek shows, there was a range of characters to latch onto without a distinct main. So
yeah, I've heard that argument as well about kind of Burnham, and I think it can be quite interesting because Sonequa Martin Green, I've seen her at sort of a convention and stuff, and she's full of beans. She's really good, and I like Michael Burnham, but she's not my favourite character in the show. But even though she is the lead, I think there's in the kind of the football analogy, there's a lot of captains in that field there. I mean, Anthony Rapp, Doug Jones, you have so many great actors and great characters there that if Michael Burnham isn't kind of doing it for you one week, well, it's probably that Sylvia Tilly will probably be doing it for you that one, or Paul Stamets. It's such a great cast, and Michelle Yeoh. I mean, I can't believe I forgot her. She was one of my favourite Bond girls in the 90s. So yeah, it was a real treat to kind of have a cast like this where you don't have to necessarily rely on one person necessarily to carry your interest. I mean, I think Captain Picard is probably one of my favourite characters, and same with Ben Sisko. That first season each for them, I wasn't quite on board with them and that, but they got better as the show went on, and I can certainly see that being the case with Burnham for sure. But she certainly delivers a cracking monologue. Yeah,
and they may sort of drift into a more ensemble based type of storytelling, which means that those characters that you do like, if you don't like her, will get more focus, which seems to be happening at this point. Sort of in season 2, they seem to be opening it up a little bit. At least so far.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell because I think it seems to be sort of like, hey, we've got this great cast, but someone like Paul Stamets maybe gets a sort of scene in it, and Doug Jones as Saru gets a couple moments in this one, so it definitely feels like kind of a an ensemble piece. But I think that's kind of the point. I mean, Star Trek's always been that way. I mean, you have the figurehead of the show, whether it's a Michael Burnham or a Sisko, but at the same time you've always got these great characters. And I think what makes something like, say, Deep Space Nine, and I think Next Generation did it quite well at times, rarer, was that you have a great backing characters as well. And it'll be interesting to see who all kind of pops in season 2. Ash Tyler, Michelle Yeoh, all these kind of characters will drip in as well. And I think that's the strength of Deep Space Nine, and hopefully Discovery as well, that you have these great characters and you can kind of mix up. One week it's a Saru episode, it's a Stamets episode, and each one's always going to be as exciting. It's not going to be like, oh, it's a Deanna Troi episode this week, or oh, it's maybe a Jake Sisko episode. I enjoyed some Jake Sisko episodes, I must admit, but some people have different opinions. So, I think we've got a lot to be excited for here. And I think it's clear that the bridge crew are going to be a bit more involved this year, which was something I kind of hoped for in season 1. And I think we'll certainly see a bit more of, say, Kayla and Reese, for example. So I'm curious to see where we go.
Yeah. So what did you think of the first episode of the season? Kind of keep it spoiler free at the moment. We'll go to Black Alert after that and dig more deeply into it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit and stuff. I mean, the problem for this part is that Star Trek Discovery is such a serialized show that I enjoy the episode, and it might be enhanced by what's to come with this sort of Red Angel storyline and Spock storyline that is still to be introduced. I really enjoyed the character moments of this episode, and I enjoyed it a bit more in the second time than the first time. The first time I was like, yeah, that was a really good hour of television. I'm curious to see where it goes next. And I think that sometimes the drawback with sort of serialized TV, perhaps like this, is that you can enjoy an episode, but you're already thinking, ooh, I wonder what's going to happen in the next episode, and you're not perhaps reflecting on it going, oh, that was a really good 45 minutes of TV, I enjoyed that plot line, it had a really good ending. Whereas this, it's sort of a bit in flux at the moment. It started some things, where does it go next? Not much has really been kind of concluded at the end of this episode. It's certainly started things off, so yeah, I know that's a bit of a cop-out, but it's a wait and see for me.
Yeah, I loved this episode. I was fully on board right from the beginning. I thought Pike was great. I thought it certainly felt a bit more confident, a bit more energetic. Whereas in season 1, they're kind of stumbling around trying to find a tone that works for them, trying to find a setup that works for them, which most shows will do in their first season, let's face it, but this is the promise of a much lighter, more exploration-focused season, although it's easy, or it's maybe not easy to forget that not a lot actually happens in the episode in terms of broad plot stuff. You kind of get the introduction of a couple of mysteries without anything really happening, so the plot is they go somewhere and don't find what they're looking for, so they have to go somewhere else next. So that's maybe the serialization could result in, everything builds on everything else, or maybe it will just be weeks of reminding us that they're not finding anything until you get these key episodes where they find something of significance. Like the Enterprise model with the Temporal Cold War, whereas every now and again you'd get an episode that was about that and pretended to move the plot forward when it really didn't. But no, I loved it, and I can't wait to see more. It's one of those, I want to see the next one right away, and it's just great to have Star Trek back.
Exactly, and I think that's the joy of it is Star Trek back. I mean, we've been in the wilderness for so long, and it's so good to have Star Trek to discuss and debate, and whether you think it's great or not or whatever. I mean, CBS have put their money where their mouth is. Like, the production quality of this episode, and really all the episodes to date so far, have been really fantastic, and we've got a top end cast, and it feels like it's an exciting time to be a Star Trek fan. And I was saying it last week when they announced the Michelle Yeoh led Section 31 show that, regardless of what the shows, and I'm not comparing any of the shows, the period we're about to enter could be potentially more exciting than the kind of the mid-90s peak when, with things like Generations and First Contact, Next Generation had just come off the air, we had Deep Space Nine sort of peaking, we had Voyager about to kind of start. I feel like we're getting to that stage again, which is kind of unbelievable to me when you think about, 11, 12 years ago, or further than, actually longer than that, when Enterprise went off the air and we had Nemesis and an empty cinema. Really, like, this is something to celebrate. Yeah,
and it feels like we'll have more Star Trek than even I can keep up with in the near future. But everything they're doing seems different as well, so it's not just variations of crew on a ship. It's whatever the Picard show turns out to be. The Michelle Yeoh thing, which will certainly be a look into a different side of the universe that we might not have seen before. This Lower Decks animated thing fascinates me. I like the idea of the least important people on the least important ship. Just this, what do people do all day? What do people do every day? And I always like these kind of flip perspectives thing. The Lower Decks episode is one of my favourite episodes of TNG, and I think that it's just a testament to the style of it. So I'd like the idea of there's meetings going on and the crew don't see it because they're not important enough to be in those meetings, and they just get kind of some out of context order at the end of it because that was what was decided in the room when they weren't there. So I'm amped for that, and whatever else they've got on their plate, whatever else they've got planned, will be interesting as well. I'm trusting the creative team here as opposed to just more of the same, which is what you got with Enterprise until they changed the writing staff.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that, it's exciting. We've got all this thing, and I think I remembered when sort of Discovery was coming along, they were sort of going to say, they were saying it was like, yeah, it's kind of a bit of a Lower Deck style thing. We're going to have a lead character that isn't the captain, and then it kind of hasn't really lived up to perhaps that ambition, but I think that animated series perhaps will lend itself a little bit better to that. Maybe this sort of shorter storytelling form, something a bit more comedic, I think will do really well with it.
Yeah. On that, I think we should go to Black Alert and really dig into this, if you have no objections.
Yeah, punch it.
Black Alert. Black Alert.
Okay, first up, we'll do our question and answer section. I only have one question. Only one person decided to ask a question. Plenty of people gave their opinions on my review, so thanks for that if any of you are listening. But the one question is from Mike, who asks, do you think this season will end with Pike's famous accident that puts him in his chair that doesn't help him communicate at all? My guess is no, because, well, chronologically it's a little bit before that. This is set after the Cage, but there's still a few years until then, although you can change that, because I don't think the year it happened was ever canonically stated. So, but I don't think it'll end like that, because it feels like it would be a bit of a downer when this season seems to be a bit more gung-ho and optimistic. So far, anyway.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I think if Discovery goes 7 years, 5 years, whatever, how many lengths of seasons that's going to go, you don't get rid of someone perhaps like Anson Mount kind of so quickly. I think he'll be someone that will exit stage left, but I think he'll be someone that will have perhaps in the background and perhaps a recurring character through the series that we might dip into once in a while, and maybe have some adventures together. I don't think we're going to get to that stage yet.
No. I kind of don't want to see it because there can be too much fan service sometimes, and I think it would be uncomfortable to try and solve the problem of the chair. What would his chair be like, and why would they put him in it at this point? With the one beep thing, because they've surely got to have better tech than that.
Yeah, I think, it would be curious to see how they would give it the Discovery twist, but I wouldn't rule it out happening at some point in the series, but certainly not within the next year.
Yeah, I agree. So, that's the end of our QA section. Just kind of start with characters. I mean, we'll touch on various little bits here and there, but the most obvious place to start is Michael, where we're playing around with her family dynamic in a much more... much deeper way than last season, because last season was very much about a relationship with Sarek, with a bit of Amanda in there, and now you've got kind of Spock, so you see them first meet in flashbacks. You see that there's not a lot of love in that relationship, which there wouldn't be because Spock is not very emotional. But so what did you think of that? How the way they built that, and the kind of the mystery of why they are so separated, and what do they need to do to get to that point where they're where they bury the hatchet, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where this whole goes, and I think it's sort of been inevitable that something like this was going to happen from day one when they announced that she was sort of Spock's half sister, and like, oh, why hasn't this been mentioned before? I mean, I didn't really care about that, to be honest, and there's always a get out of these sorts of things. So I think it was an interesting start, but again, it's one of those ones. It sort of starts it off, it teases a bit with a little younger Spock, and her apprehension, excitement, nervousness when Spock's potentially beaming over. Again, it's something it starts, but I don't really know perhaps where it's going to go, and I'm curious to see again what they kind of do with this one. And I think it was bold of them to introduce Spock. They didn't have to do that at this stage of the show, if at all, really, to be honest. So I feel that if they're doing it for the right reasons, and I'm curious to see how they're going to add to the Spock character over the kind of coming episodes.
It kind of bothered me at first when they announced that she was Spock's half sister. But then, the execution of it was fine. And if you think about it, Spock doesn't mention who his father is until he turns up in the original series. So, the fact that he would never mention the fact that he has a half-sister or an adopted sister shouldn't really factor in. It's just not what he does. He didn't mention Cyborg until they bumped into him. Although, is that still canon? Who knows?
That's 100% canon.
He certainly wasn't there, Cyborg. He wasn't kicking about in the house. But, maybe he was in his room. Maybe we'll see Cyborg. Wouldn't that be cool? Maybe not.
I expect we're going to get him at some point in the series.
Yeah, because he's probably someone they could use more liberally, because you have no idea what he's up to at this point. So, whereas with Spock, his career is very much mapped out, apart from this part, I guess. I liked the angle of them being not one big happy family. The fact that Spock is essentially jealous of this newcomer to his family who takes his mother's affection, and who his father seems to favour, I guess, from his perspective. I mean, I know that jealousy is not logical, but he's a kid. He's going to be jealous. The scene where he looks over at his mum reading the story to Michael, and just kind of the fact that he's not part of that, even though he so easily could be. It's almost like he's fighting. It's the beginning of him fighting his nature, his Vulcan nature versus his human nature. So that's interesting to me, and I think we'll get to see a more Cage-style Spock, where he's a bit more emotional when he's introduced.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely see that. I mean, it kind of fits in with what we saw of Spock in sort of the young baby Spock in sort of the Kelvin timeline and the Spock in yesteryear in the animated series. It feels all very consistent. This is a pretty conflicted young child, and I think it'll be interesting to kind of learn a bit more about that kind of childhood and what led him to become the sort of Spock and the more repressed Spock that we kind of knew in those early years.
Yeah, and it's a nice touch to connect the mystery surrounding where Spock is to the central plot mystery, because then it doesn't divorce them. It keeps everything focused on all the characters. So in theory, as the main plot progresses, the character story should progress, and that's how it should work. Because otherwise, it is just the heading places and scanning stuff sort of plotting, which may not be that interesting on its own.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's just modern storytelling now, isn't it? That you have a big bench of characters, you have something to tie that gets you hooked in through the season. You know, gone are the days where Star Trek Next Generation would be shown perhaps out of order at crazy times of the night. It's kind of aimed at that binge watching audience where you watch an episode like this and go, well, I've literally watched the hour of something starting, I haven't seen sort of the next part, and it keeps you kind of hooked in, as opposed to sort of that traditional storytelling, the beginning, middle and ending. Now these things are sort of a one long story, and then it's sort of compacted into an hour. Yeah.
And and I think it enhances the Michael Sarek relationship as well, because you always get these little bits and pieces about why Sarek does things. You know, it doesn't seem to make any sense until he sort of explains it. You get it in the original series when it's, you know, why did you marry my mother? Because it seemed like the logical thing to do at the time. And later on, you know, he sort of comes to favour Kirk because he recognises the friendship and things like that. But the idea that he brings Michael in to help Spock learn empathy because he doesn't get that from his mother because he has too much reverence for her, which feels a bit weird as a reason, but it sort of makes sense as to, I guess, almost as a social experiment on Sarek's part to adopt this child to sort of help his son be a better person or a deeper person.
Yeah, I personally quite like Sarek in this show as well, and I'm curious. It's good learning sort of a bit more about Sarek. He was always a character I really enjoyed in the small bits that we got of him in sort of TNG original series and some of the movies. I think he's a fantastic character, and I'm really glad. I remember when it was announced that he was going to be kind of part of this kind of shindig, I was really over the moon. So I think he's doing really well with it.
And James Frain is excellent in the role as well.
I
could watch him all day as Sarek. Not so much whoever it was in the 2009 movie, he wasn't so good, but James Frain seems to be pretty close to Mark Lenard in terms of gravitas.
Yeah, I think so, and I remember James Frain from, I suppose, like his wife as well. He was a bit of a 24 guest star back in the day. He was Audrey Raines' husband. I thought he was really good. I think he's a really good actor, and I think he's in Gotham as well, is he? I know you'd be better suited to that question.
Season 2, which is when I was still watching it. Yeah, he was in that. Everybody thought it was going to be Ra's al Ghul, and spoiler, he wasn't. But no, he was good in that too. I think Gotham's problem isn't the cast; it's so many other things. Although I haven't watched it in like 4 years, so who knows? That's not relevant. So. We've got Captain Pike, our guest captain. You know, you've got to wonder about this. Whoever Discovery's real captain is, he's sitting there on Vulcan checking his watch. I'm like, where are they? You know, it's got to be pretty frustrating for him. It's like waiting on the bus. It's like, where is it? It's not here yet. So Pike, he rushes in, takes command because Starfleet told him to, because his ship breaks, and then he takes Discovery on an adventure. And I think right from that his first line, you know, which is the line you see in the trailer as well, where he's like, right, I'm here to take command, deal with it. And then I think from there he just sort of, he shows his approachability, he shows how different he is to Lorca, which is key because we don't want a repeat of that. Not that he wasn't good, it's just, you know, if you're going to have a new captain, he can't be the same. So what did you think of him, like based on his introduction?
Oh yeah, I was all on board for this. I think kind of pre-publicity kind of trailers and photos, and I think, you know, Anson Mount himself on sort of social media, he just seems like such a great guy. And I think there's a bit where you sort of think there's a bit of a disconnect between this guy and what we maybe saw a few years earlier in what would have been the Cage, but then you think post-Cage he's been kind of reinvigorated, he's kind of full of beans, new kind of brought to life, and he feels like a kind of Pikey kind of Kirk style character. He's a bit of a swashbuckler. He is an inspiring figure, and I love the thing where it's like, right, round the room, if we're going into this thing, I want to know all your names and so on. And you know, when you see him with all his achievements on the back, and he just seems like such a personable guy, and you immediately get the impression of like, yeah, I would follow that guy into combat. Yeah, whatever he says. And I like the way the crew look at him. And, you know, he's certainly not without his failings. I mean, the moment where he kind of snaps at Michael, where she's maybe being a bit negative, she's saying, this is the situation we're going to go into. And then he's like, right, we're not leaving anyone behind. And she's like, well, actually, I was just getting to that bit as well. I thought that was good. It kind of makes him, you know, not unfailable.
Yeah. Although his approach to I don't mind dissenting opinions as long as they come with solutions is a bit bizarre, because not every problem will have a solution, and it's worth that someone raises it to him. I don't know. But he's not a perfect leader, and neither he should be, because perfection's boring. You know, there's no point in what...
Gene Roddenberry's rolling in his grave at that comment.
Yeah, but he, you know... a bunch of TV writers who were working on Star Trek were like, how do we write these things? We're not allowed to put any flaws in these characters. What are they doing? They're just sitting around being perfect, getting into adventures somehow. But no, I think for Pike, it's not his crew, so he has to learn how they work. He has to learn their rhythms. He has to earn their trust, even though he can tell them what to do. If they don't trust him, if they don't respect him, then they won't get much done, and they won't be as effective. So right early on he's like, look, here's my service record. Oh look, there's a failing grade. I'm just like you, I fail at stuff, you know, I'm not perfect. And when he says later, I like my ready room to be a place where people can come and have a chat and sit down. You know, the key thing is sitting down, because Lorca didn't like people to sit in his ready room, not even himself. But yeah, he's great, and I think it's lives up to the promise of kind of everything you hear about Pike. And I've read a few tie-in novels that are about the Jeffrey Hunter version of the character, and he sort of fits that model of Pike, and I think Anson Mount's enthusiasm comes through as well, although his enthusiasm is always infectious, even when he was on Inhumans, which is a show he'd probably like to forget. I remember on Twitter...
No one ever watched that show, so he doesn't need to worry.
I did. I watched all of it.
Well, there's someone.
Yeah, one person. I didn't like it, but I watched it. But his Twitter bio had the 3 dots, you know, because it was silence, he couldn't say anything. So that was, you know, it's just kind of him throwing himself into it, and yeah, I think he's a great catch for the franchise. He looks like Jeffrey Hunter as well, a little bit, which, you know, is not necessary, but it helps.
He is definitely a very good-looking man. He's definitely a bit hotter than Bruce Greenwood, just a tad, I'm sure.
Yeah, I just thought Bruce Greenwood was a little bit old for Pike, especially at that point. I mean, he was great, but a little bit old.
Yeah, and I suppose it is a few years ahead of where we are just now. And yeah. I did like Bruce Greenwood as sort of the kind of mentor figure. I thought he was particularly good. But yeah, I liked him, and he certainly looks good in that gold command outfit.
That he only wears ever so briefly.
Yes, but God, it looks good.
They made all those outfits and they'll hardly get to use them. Unless the Discovery crew changed to them at some point.
I wouldn't be surprised.
So and we had a bit from this sort of side characters. You've got Tilly, who's drunk on power, which I thought was really funny. Now she's an ensign, and she can take labs off people that don't need them and things like that. I thought it was good, and how upset she was when Stamets said he was leaving. I think she's definitely the heart of the show, and I think that it's good that they've preserved that.
Yeah, I think she was definitely one of the strong points of season 1. I mean, between all these characters depressed, living in fear and death and despair, kind of Tilly kept it all kind of she was the fan sort of in this show, and you always need a character like that, and I thought she was certainly excellent. Yeah,
someone said that she was Wesley Crusher done right, which I'm not entirely sure is accurate, but I think it's quite funny.
Yeah, I can sort of see where they're coming from with that.
Yeah. And Stamets, of course, leaving. It's clearly he's just saying that for now. He won't actually be going anywhere, which those kind of fake outs are all too common in Star Trek. It's usually on a season finale or something, isn't it? Where it's like, oh no, Worf's leaving, and then by the end of the next episode, oh look, he's back. It's fine. So I feel like they're kind of trying to do that. Although I wonder if the more science-based focus of the show will reinvigorate him in some way, and he'll get, he'll be interested in being back on the ship because the warship Discovery wasn't for him. That was established early on.
Yeah, and I suspect this big meteorite or asteroid that they've got in the back of the hull now, I think that'll certainly bring him into kind of back into the fold.
Yeah, and they still don't have, a chief engineer, so, I don't think that'll be him because he has a very specific focus, but it's weird that we haven't even met or have mention of a chief engineer.
I think we just maybe met her in this episode.
I hope so. I think Jet was really good. I like her kind of... She's almost like a cross between Scotty and McCoy. She's kind of brash, but also a genius.
Yeah, I thought she was really good in this. I'm excited. I have a feeling she's not just in this for like a 5-minute piece. I think she's going to be our new chief engineer. Yeah,
which kind of references Lorca's ability to just pick up waifs and strays and positions of influence on his ship.
Absolutely.
Yeah, hopefully she's not like a Klingon agent, but or a Romulan agent. Why not?
Oh God, I know. I think we're going to be lucky and we're going to get a break from them.
Yeah. So what did you think of the Red Burst story? I mentioned in the spoiler-free section that you don't really know anything yet. There's nothing actually happened.
You kind of answered you kind of gave my answer there. Really, it's something I'm interested about. I like the imagery that when kind of Burnham sees it, and I like when we sort of see it in the credits. Again, come back to me in a few weeks and I can give you a strong opinion on where this goes and anything. Again, it's like, ooh, that's interesting. I'm very curious. You've got my attention. I remember when it was sort of teased in the first trailer like months ago, and it was like, ooh, it's definitely going to be that kind of season. It's going to be a bit of an adventure. It's going to be some science. It's going to be some discovery. I'm curious to see what it is and what it's all about and where they go with this, what I imagine will be over the first half of the season or the full season.
And I think there's going to be some form of mythology versus science debate, or explaining mythology through science. So the Red Angel thing, that's obviously a mythological being, so there'll be some explanation as to what that is. And they might explore why it became myth on certain planets or whatever else. So I think we'll need to see, I guess, some kind of species that deify this Red Angel thing.
Yeah, I'm curious, and it's certainly they've not really alluded to much, or we know certain characters are coming back this season, but this one seems to be a bit of a plot line they've kept quite under wraps.
Yeah, and I think they're pretty good at that. I hate it when everything's spoiled before I watch something, and you get a casting announcement or you get notification that someone's returning. We're in the spoiler section, so I guess a lot of people know that Culver will be back because he's in the main cast for the season, although they don't know what form that'll take or how he'll be back or if he will actually be back, or whether he'll just kind of appear in visions from Stamets or whether he'll actually be physically there. It's unknown, and we know we're going to get Tyler / Volk coming back, and Georgiou obviously, so it'd be interesting to see how these things tie in, and what use the Klingons are now that there's no war as well.
I remembered when it was sort of announced, when you'd have sort of it was like, you'll have Sarek and the Klingons, and as a sort of regular recurring characters and stuff. Like, I always had this image of like 3 different kind of plot lines all sort of unfolding, and they overlap and bend and stuff. And I think that we could see a bit more of that kind of this year, where we have the action on Discovery, but we also have what's going on sort of the Klingon Empire and how it all kind of comes together, I think.
Yeah, because I don't think L'Rell can be Chancellor for very long. Just based on the way the Klingon Empire goes that we see in the original series and stuff. So I wonder if she will be accepted, because her entire political platform is, I can blow up the planet at any minute, so you have to follow me. So I wonder if there'll be some kind of coup attempt against her because of that.
Yeah, you can certainly never bet on who's going to stay atop of the chair for long, but the Klingons can be traditional. You think of some of the chancellors that we've seen in Star Trek before. They death eventually does come to them one way or another, but they tend to solidify power for quite a while. So it'll be curious to see if L'Rell manages to do the same.
Yeah, couldn't get rid of Gowron.
No.
For a long time. And then Martok, you don't know. Unless you play video games, you don't know what happens to him, really.
What happens to him in the video games? As someone that I read the comic books, I watch the TV shows and the films, don't bother with the other medium.
Oh, he just remains Chancellor for a bit. The last appearance that I know of was in Star Trek Armada 2, where it's probably not canon because you can build a Sovereign class ship in 5 minutes, but or less. So he's just kind of there. It's because I guess J.G. Hertzler's quite cheap, and they can get his voice cheap enough. I don't know.
Yeah, he is a voiceover artist as well, and I think he got found out doing sort of treasure. It's in that Star Trek Deep Space Nine documentary that's going to come out eventually. I've been lucky enough to see it, and they talk about how he got hired, and it was because he was doing like a pirate impression at Treasure Island in Las Vegas, and Ira Stephen Beer saw it and went, "Huh, I want that."
Yeah, I pledged for that documentary. I'm still waiting for a release date.
Oh, it's well worth the wait. I was lucky to see it in a cinema screen last year, and it's, oh my god, you're in for a treat when it comes.
Although they're still remastering some of the clips that they want to use, aren't they?
Yeah, the only HD clips I got to see at the time was sort of from the Dominion Federation battle from Sacrifice of the Angels, and oh my god, it's going to look great on a Blu-ray, but imagine that on a big screen. Holy hell.
Yeah, I'm hoping that some local cinema will screen it for one night or something.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Tweet the cameo until they... Everybody listening, tweet the cameo and make them do it.
Yeah, I'm up for that.
The events of this episode were... I mean, even though nothing really happened, I think they were still exciting enough. I quite like essentially they blunder into a rescue mission, which is very Star Trek. You approach a situation, oh god, there's a distress call, let's see what's happening here. And then it seems that in the modern Star Trek era, extreme sports, it's the only way to get from one place to another when both are kind of dangerous. I mean, whatever it was, the landing pods or whatever they were called, it sort of reminded me of the two sequences, one from Star Trek 2009, the other from Into Darkness, where they couldn't use the transporter for whatever reason.
Yeah, I definitely got that impression as well, and I thought the sound design was quite interesting as well. It sounded like Formula One racing, which was pretty cool. Yeah,
and it was exciting. I mean, it was maybe kind of dumb. Why didn't they travel slower, for example? But it was one of those things. But I love that you can have an exciting action sequence these days without it resorting to combat. I mean, the thing about Star Trek is it was never really about violence, and then at some point they decided that space battles were cool, so let's throw them in. And you couldn't have an episode of Voyager before they were lobbing phasers at someone. So it's good that they're focusing a bit more on how can we make some creative sequences involving the technology and the situations. They kind of did that last season towards the end when you had that spore planet, where they were encouraging the spores to grow, and it was this really expensive, really slick-looking sequence that had nothing to do with two ships fighting each other.
Yeah, I always like that. I think we'll certainly see more of that probably kind of this year. I mean, we didn't really see anything shooting or blowing up this year, and I think that seems to be more kind of the season. This is going to be the year of discovery. I mean, they kind of got us all in last year with the big adventure, the war. That's probably how you get kind of mainstream TV audiences in. And then now that they've kind of got them in, it's like, hey, we've got you on a science and geeky show. I mean, they're celebrating maths and so on in this episode. So I think that's kind of where we're going to go. But I don't certainly doubt that we're going to see some things go boom in this season too. Yeah,
and I liked that it subverted the red shirt trope by killing the blue shirt. That was a nice little touch. Plus, I'm not saying that he deserved it, but he was kind of a dick.
Yes, he was. Yeah, I saw a really good meme where it was like it said mansplaining, and then you see him just explode and stuff. And I mean, you knew he was just for the chop when he wasn't listening.
I always don't like this thing where you introduce a character just to be the contrarian to another character, because we already know how impressive Michael is and how smart she is, and you don't really need someone sort of undermining her standing there to prove that. Although I quite like it's a metaphor. It's like actually it's a simile.
Yeah.
But yeah, that Connolly, I think his name was.
Yeah,
I wasn't a fan. But and Pike didn't seem that bothered about his science officer being killed. He's like the work experience guy while Spock's not around.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're I think he all got what he deserved in that one.
Yeah, And then the introduction of Jet, as we've touched on, was really good. I think this episode's really weird in that you don't spend a lot of time on anything. It's like they get in, make their point, and then get out, which is good in a way, although I might have liked to spend a bit more time just, I don't know, sciencing about on the derelict ship. That might have been quite fun.
I did enjoy sort of the science element of how they kept all these people alive, and I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, and then we'll rig up pattern enhancers, but we'll also use the transporter and all this tech stuff flying about. And I suppose it is refreshing that they don't have a 5-minute conversation on how the pattern buffers work and all this kind of stuff, because you don't really need that. You know, the characters should all know this information. Yeah,
exactly. But I suppose you've got to assume, right, people are dropping into season 2 perhaps for the first time, and how do you kind of treat them? Do you treat them as if they're going to know everything, or do you sort of explain things out? And on a grand level, I would be like, oh, just go with it. It doesn't matter. But I suppose you've just got to be conscious of perhaps the audience, that Star Trek isn't just for nerds like us now. It's people that I would never in a million years have thought would watch these things, talk about these things, care about these things, are engaging with it.
Yeah. What did you think of the Michael's vision? I mean, people have commented that the fact that Pike runs in front of it suggests that, I don't know, he's connected to that in some way. I don't think that's the case, although, and it's a very specific thing for Michael to just hallucinate.
I'm going to shock you. You'll have to get back to me perhaps in a few episodes on that one. I enjoyed the vision. Theories. No, I enjoyed the vision thing, and I never kind of got the impression that he might be connected to it, which, maybe he could, but I suppose the fact that he does have a larger role to play in the Star Trek to come, whether he's involved or not, I don't know. I suppose that's the thing when you do a bit of a prequel sometimes and you've got a kind of character, you know where their fate's going to go, and it makes you maybe doubt things, or it kills a theory perhaps, so I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I think the only bit of Pike foreshadowing I really picked up on was the fortune.
Yes.
Yeah, where it suggested that, the cage that he was in will end up not being a cage for him as such.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's already happened for him as well, and I thought that was a little on the nose, but yeah, it was fine.
And apparently no one's hoovered Lorca's quarters in months.
No, exactly. That's poor planning there. But hey, maybe they were just like, you just left it.
Yeah. Some people have suggested it might foreshadow Lorca's return in some way. I don't think so. I think if they were going to do that, they would have done more than a piece of paper on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
But we shall see. Maybe we'll come back. Maybe we'll get the Prime version of Lorca. Who knows?
Yeah, I think I'm expecting that at some point down the line.
Yeah, when we're in season 8 and running out of ideas.
Yes, absolutely.
Chuck in Prime Lorca now. Jason Isaacs is free again.
Yeah.
So I was actually surprised at how little the Enterprise was used. I get the impression that whoever wrote the Enterprise's appearance at the end of the last season had no idea what they were planning to do with it. It was just one of those, let's chuck this in because we can. And we'll figure out something later. And this is, it's classic Star Trek as well. You write the first part without knowing the second part. But then, from the start of this, they had no idea what they were doing. With the Enterprise, so they just pick up Pike and then they leave. And then at the end, she visits the Enterprise, and you see Spock's quarters, which has some nice fan service in there with the door sound, little Easter eggs like his 3-dimensional chess set, his Vulcan lyre. I think that was it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where it going to go. I'm curious. I think we'll see certainly more of the Enterprise, because we haven't seen number 1 yet. We know she's to appear, so I think we'll sort of see a bit more of the Enterprise in episode 2.
You think it'll be as soon as that?
Yeah, I think so. I think, the fact that she's already on the Enterprise, they're going to have to leave the Enterprise to go off on a mission very shortly. So I suspect we're going to get that in kind of the next episode or so. That's my theory.
I guess I'd kind of assumed that the next episode would pick up like a few days later or something like that. Maybe it will be a straight sequel in effect, where they'll just where they'll set off. But there's been no chat about them building the bridge set or anything like that. I think if they were to build the bridge set, we'd have seen it by now.
Yeah, they maybe not see the bridge, but we'll definitely see something. Maybe the kind of rec room or something like that.
Yeah, I think it'd be more likely that number 1 or whoever will visit Discovery rather than seeing it on the Enterprise.
Yeah.
I think. But then you might get the team-up episode that we've all been looking for.
Exactly.
Later in the season, once they fix the damn thing.
Yeah.
The poor broken Enterprise.
I know, I'm curious about that.
Yeah, well, it seems connected to the red bursts in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because it happened at exactly the same time, so that's it's weird.
Yeah, I just don't know. It seems like it kind of mentioned it's been damaged, and it's like I know they're doing the Enterprise War or something. That's a book coming out, kind of what the Enterprise is up to while it was away. So I'm sure there'll be some explanation. It just seems odd. I was like, oh, like it's damaged, but we're not really acknowledging why it's been damaged. It's I don't get it.
And I quite like the idea of Pike being a bit upset about the fact that he had to sit the war out because he had no control over the events. It means that whatever would happen without his or his crew's intervention, and they were told to just stay out there scanning stuff, and we'll continue fighting the Klingons. It's fine. There might not be a Federation to come back to, but might be okay. You'll be okay out there.
Yeah, I'm going to definitely. I will probably read the Memory Alpha summary of that Enterprise War book when it comes out. But I'm interested to find out what its reasoning was for being outside of the war, and sort of what they were up to, and perhaps explaining why it's such a damaged ship as we meet it now.
Yeah, well, the suggestion is that they were too far away at that point, but then they were close enough at the end of last season, so.
I guess we're going to... once again, we will find out in the future. Get back to us.
Yeah, half a dozen episodes from now, we'll know the answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I thought the interior of the Enterprise, from what we saw of it, was nicely updated. I quite like the circular grating thing effect in the background.
Yeah.
It's a nice little... it's just a nice little nod to what came before. I think, obviously, the design aesthetic will be updated somewhat. I don't think it'll be quite so sleek and shiny as the 2009 film bridge.
No, it's not going to look like an Apple store.
No, but I think it'll be somewhere in between that and the original series bridge.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've no problem with that. I think updating these things is nice, and I think it's. I'll have faith in the production team to kind of put enough recognisable elements in there to keep me happy.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Yeah. So, I don't think I've got much else to say on the first episode. I mean, it's got me excited for season 2. I can't wait to see more of it. It's one of those things where, I mean, usually I'm not a sort of binge sort of guy, but because, I don't know, it's just finding the time to do it. And when I review the stuff, I hate reviewing full seasons of stuff. It's just so difficult. But when that episode ended, I was like, I want to see the next one. Why didn't we release them all at once? And I never quite felt like that during season 1, actually.
I like having it one at a time, because it feels like that's a bit of traditional Trek, really, for me, that you get to enjoy the episodes, you get to talk about it, and you can think about it, and it's like, oh, what's the next one going to be? You watch trailer for the next one, what's that on YouTube, and oh, that's the next episode. You get to think about it and kind of deal with it, and considering we grew up in an era where you had it months after on Sky, or you had to wait forever for the VHS. I think it's pretty awesome that we've got it kind of once a week still. I'm glad. I don't want it to ever be bingeable. I mean, I'd love it if it was, but I don't want it to be.
Yeah. VHS was how I experienced it early on.
Yes.
Once a month, the videotapes.
Yeah, well, as I say,
episodes on them.
Yeah, I've got my collection of VHS covers and my Twitter account dedicated to that, so you're always welcome to check that out.
I'll need to put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking that years ago. I was thinking, most people will have just chucked those videos out because they're obsolete, because they're videos. But they did have bespoke artwork on every single one.
Oh, yeah, and I liked it. I've got hundreds of those covers, hundreds of them, all preserved and stuff.
Oh, that's good. It's not gone with... It's not been lost to the annals of history.
No, I collected them all from eBay and haggled and got them all, and then scanned hundreds and hundreds of covers, and then I shared them with TrekCore, so you can find like hundreds of the covers there. So even if I just end up closing my Twitter account, or it gets banned for some sort of abuse or something, there's always going to be somewhere that you can access these covers.
Paramount issue a copyright claim on obsolete VHS.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Can imagine. I feel like that's something they would do.
Hopefully not. Stick to Axanar and things like that. Leave my Twitter feed alone.
Yeah, let's not get on to Axanar. That'd be a loaded conversation. So, as a kind of final thing, what are your hopes for the season, and do you have any predictions other than come back to me next month?
I don't know. I think sometimes that I used to host a kind of Star Trek podcast, and I would, it was always talking about things and predicting things, and I would get so caught up in it. And kind of over the years with film and TV, I've tried not to get caught up in what's the next episode, what's going to be this big thing for the season. And I like sometimes hearing other people's thoughts and opinions, but I try not to make my own. I just try and kind of go in and go, right, surprise me this week, catch me off guard. And, when I was younger, I used to just throw myself into these things, read the spoilers for 24 episodes that weren't out for weeks, and all these sorts of things. And I don't have much of the predictions because I'm trying not to think about it. I expect it to be an enjoyable show, to be quite exciting. I like being able to discuss it and, with a conversation like this with yourself, Craig. But I'm not going to make any predictions because I've not really thought that far ahead. I'm like, this is going to be interesting. I'm curious to see where this will go and, surprise me. And that's all I asked from a Star Trek show. I waited years and thought, I wonder what a Star Trek series could be like. I wonder if it could be like this and does this, and this. Let's surprise me. Let's go and as Pike says, let's have some fun. If it ruffles my feathers along the way, then that's doing a good job. And I can always speculate some other time. But I know that's a bit boring. But that's just who I've become, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, as someone that reviews the show, I'm kind of hardwired to do a bit of speculation. I think, this conversation will be important later, or this little detail will be important later, and then it's good that I can read back and see if I was right. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not.
Yeah,
I think this is the first Star Trek show where you could really chuck in sort of predictions, because it wasn't always clear if anything was going to be important ever. I mean, if you watch Voyager, the characters don't remember what they did last week, so why should I? So Deep Space Nine, there was kind of the, what do you think Ducat's plan is, or what will the end result of the war be, or will everybody make it out alive? That kind of stuff. And I think to a lesser extent you could do that with DS9, but still they kind of were that halfway house between episodic and serialised, because it was the 90s and you couldn't really dip your toe too far in the water in that respect. TNG, you couldn't really predict anything unless it was one of the two-parters. It's like, how will they save Picard from the Borg? Who knows? Will Worf come back after joining the Klingons? And it's like, well, of course he will, because by the end of each episode the status quo is restored, because it has to be syndicated, and you have to be able to watch any episode and jump into it. But so this is the first Star Trek show where you can actually do that, and I quite like that. And almost none of my predictions came true in the first season. Well, I think things like destroying the ISS Discovery off screen and dealing with certain things just by hand waving them away was a mistake that they made, because they robbed the show of some drama that way. So I hope they don't do that this season. I hope that you get sort of satisfying payoff to what they're trying to set up.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're in good hands for the year, and let's go boldly.
Yeah. So thank you very much for guesting on the podcast. We've been talking about it for a while, so it's been good to have you on. Good to talk Star Trek. I mean, I could talk about it for days, which is, I suppose, if you add up the time spent talking about Star Trek on this podcast, probably have talked about it. But it's great having it back, and it's great to have a chat about it. I mean, won't be doing a weekly podcast because that would kill me. It would actually kill me. But we'll perhaps come back at the end of the season, and you'll be most welcome on that episode.
Yeah, count me in. I'm always keen to come on. It makes a change from talking about pretentious independent movies, I suppose.
Well, it could be pretentious Star Trek. Who knows? Yeah. So now that your podcast is repaired, I'll be able to beam you back, and you can resume your journey. So thanks again for coming on. It was great having you.
Yeah, live long and prosper, Craig.
And you. Or it's peace and long life is the normal response. So, that was our discussion on the first episode of Star Trek Discovery Season 2, the episode titled Brother. Thanks to Lee for making a guest appearance on this podcast, and I'd also like to thank YouTubers L'Orchestra Cinematique and Gorkum Burke Ajar, please excuse my pronunciation, I've probably messed that up, for the supplied music. If you like what you heard, then hit that subscribe button in iTunes, YouTube, or any major podcasting app. iTunes users, please do leave a star rating and a comment to let us know you care. If you want to talk about this or anything else, you can contact us on Facebook or Twitter under Kneel Before Blog, or leave comments on kneelbeforeblog.co.uk. As always, I hope you'll join us on the next Kneel Before Pod.